The night the giant Apache girl walked out of the cottonwoods and into Eli Mercer's failing farm. The wind carried the smell of rain and iron, and the moon hung low like a promise no one believed anymore. Eli had been alone for so long that the sound of footsteps felt like a memory instead of a warning. Yet he looked up from mending a broken fence and saw her silhouette, cut against the pale sky, taller than most men he'd known. Shoulders broad, braids thick as rope, eyes steady as river stones. He reached for the old rifle out of habit, then stopped, because something in the way she stood, straight, unafraid, hands open, made violence feel foolish. She spoke first, voice deep and calm, telling him she had crossed miles of dry land, outrun men who hunted her for bounty and sport, and followed the smoke of his chimney because it meant warmth, bread, and a place that still believed in mercy. Eli had little to offer. His fields were sick with dust. His barn leaned like a tired old horse, and his heart had learned to close its doors. But he gave her water, then stew, and watched her eat, with the careful grace of someone who had known hunger too long. She told him her name was Naya, that her people called her giant not for cruelty but for the way she stood between danger and the small ones, and that she had learned early to sleep light, to listen for boots and whispers. When the rain finally broke and thunder rolled like distant hooves, Eli offered the hayloft, embarrassed by the smallness of his house and the loneliness that echoed in it. But she shook her head and studied him with eyes that missed nothing. "You will sleep on my bed," she said, not as a command of desire, but as a vow of protection, explaining that men came in the dark, that fear made even kind souls careless, and that she would not have him standing watch alone when his bones already ached with years of worry. The words stunned him, and for a heartbeat he saw the town's cruel smiles, the stories they would twist. Yet Naya's gaze held only resolve. They pushed the bed against the wall, set a chair beneath the door latch, and slept back to back, two strangers sharing the simple courage of breathing in the same room. In the hours before dawn, Eli dreamed of his father's laugh and his mother's hands kneading bread, of fields green again, and when he woke to silence unbroken by danger, he knew something had changed. At sunrise, men arrived, 3 riders with hard boots and harder eyes, asking after a runaway, "Apache!" And Naya stepped into the yard, towering and calm, while Eli felt fear burn through him like frost. She spoke to the riders without flinching, telling them this land was watched, that kindness had a long memory, and that harm would not pass unnoticed. Whether it was her size, her certainty, or the way Eli stood beside her with nothing but truth in his hands, the riders turned away. As their dust settled, Naya knelt and pressed her palm into the soil, whispering thanks, and Eli realized he had been given a gift he didn't deserve, but would fight to keep. The days that followed were small miracles. Naya repaired fences faster than any hired hand, lifted beams as if the wood were light, and taught Eli old ways of reading weather and soil. At night they shared stories, and the bed became a border of trust, a place where sleep was finally deep. If this beginning stirs something in you, if you feel the pull of courage found in unexpected places, remember to subscribe to the channel, because stories like this carry on only when you choose to walk with them. Word travels faster than rain on the plains, and soon the town knew Eli Mercer's farm had changed, though they did not know how or why, only that the fields held green where dust had ruled, and that a tall Apache woman worked the land with a patience that shamed the idle. Trouble came wearing borrowed law, a marshal with papers that smelled of ink and greed, claiming the land for debts Eli could never pay, hinting that Naya's presence made everything easier to seize. Eli felt the old helplessness claw back into him, but Naya met the marshal's smile with a silence that weighed more than threats. And when she spoke, it was to ask for time, to harvest, to prove the land lived. She rallied neighbors who remembered kindnesses Eli had given when he had little, and together they worked dawn to dusk, hands blistered, backs bent, hearts stubborn. Nights grew colder, and again Naya said, "You will sleep on my bed." because fear had returned with boots and whispers, and she would not let it steal what they were building. Eli learned that protection is not ownership, that sharing a space does not steal dignity, but restores it, and that strength can be gentle without being weak. When men tried to burn the barn, Naya stood between flame and wood until others arrived, shamed into action by her courage. The harvest came heavy and bright, debts were paid, and the marshal rode away lighter than he arrived. At the first snowfall, Naya told Eli she might leave when spring opened the roads, because giants are meant to guard many, not stay where they are worshipped. Eli did not beg. He thanked her, because gratitude is braver than possession. On the last night before winter locked the land, they slept back to back once more, listening to the wind, knowing that whatever paths awaited, they had remade each other. When spring came, Naya stayed, not because she was asked, but because the land needed a guardian, and Eli had learned to stand. And if this ending warmed you, if you believe stories can teach us how to be better than we were, subscribe to the channel and keep these wild, hopeful tales alive. Spring did not arrive gently that year. It came like a test, flooding the low fields, tearing fences loose, and carrying with it rumors sharper than any blade. The town, uneasy with what it could not control, began to whisper again about the giant, a Apache woman who slept in a farmer's house and stood taller than their certainties. Eli felt those whispers before he heard them, in the way men avoided his eyes at the supply store, in the way women pulled children closer when Naya passed. Though those same children stared with awe, Naya sensed it too, and one dawn she rose before the birds, stood at the edge of the fields, and told Eli that storms reveal what people truly believe. Some rebuild, others burn. Trouble returned, wearing many faces this time. A cattle baron who wanted the water rights, a preacher who spoke softly of salvation while stirring fear, and young men eager to prove themselves cruel. When they came riding, claiming the creek and the land by force, Eli felt the old panic tighten his chest, but Naya placed a steady hand on his shoulder and reminded him that land listens to those who care for it. She organized the neighbors again, not with threats but with work, digging channels, reinforcing banks, sharing food, and reminding them that survival is a shared language older than hate. Nights grew dangerous. Shots cracked in the distance. Shadows crept near the barn, and once a torch was thrown and smothered just in time. Each night, Naya repeated the same quiet vow: "You will sleep on my bed," not as command, not as claim, but as shield. And Eli understood then that protection is love stripped of romance and left with truth. One evening, the cattle baron confronted them openly, sneering that a man who hid behind a woman deserved nothing. And something deep and patient rose in Eli at last. He spoke of debt paid with sweat, of land healed with care, of nights guarded not by fear, but by trust. And the words surprised even him. When the baron lunged, Naya stepped between them, unmoving as stone. And the gathered crowd saw not a monster but a guardian, who chose restraint over ruin. The confrontation ended without blood, not because violence was impossible, but because it was refused. Weeks later, a sickness swept through the town, taking children first, and fear turned to desperation. Naya worked without rest, carrying water, chopping wood, sitting through the night with the fevered, while Eli rode for medicine and brought back what little he could. When the sickness broke, the town changed in small, lasting ways. Eyes lifted, doors opened, apologies spoken without being asked. At the first summer gathering, Naya was invited to stand among them, not as curiosity, but as kin, and Eli watched pride and humility braid together in his chest. That night, under a sky loud with stars, Naya told Eli that giants do not measure their lives by how long they stay, but by what stands after they are gone. And Eli answered that some fields grow best when guarded by those who choose to remain. She smiled then, rare and soft, and said nothing, because the land itself was answering. They slept as they always had, backs touching, breath steady, knowing the world would test them again, but also knowing they were no longer alone. And if this final chapter stayed with you, if you believe strength can be gentle, courage can be shared, And stories like these still matter. Subscribe to the channel, because every new tale begins with listeners who choose to stay.